So again, good morning, church. Before I start off, I just want to say how a privilege this is for me to actually have the opportunity to come here and serve with you guys. I usually sing or I'm doing the Lord's Supper, but this morning Mike asked me if I could preach today, and I was a little bit nervous, obviously, but it really is something that excites me and something that I really want to do full time one day. And it really challenged me to get out of my comfort zone, but this is something that I really want to do one day, because I really love doing this. So these past couple of weeks, I've been feeling like I've been treated unfairly. And I'm not sure if you guys ever felt that way, if you guys ever felt like you guys were being treated unfairly. And I want you guys to think about a time where you felt like you were being treated unfairly. And that's what the question I want to ask you guys today. I want you guys to think about a time where you felt you were being treated unfairly, or you saw something that you didn't think was quite fair. And I want you guys to think about that for a second. And how did that make you feel? Were you surprised? Were you angry? Was it maybe frustration? Was it maybe annoyed? And I know for me personally, the reason why I state those emotions that I just did, because this is emotions that I'm feeling just a couple weeks ago. Just a week ago. This is emotions that I've been feeling like, because I've been feeling like I haven't been treated fairly. So I'm going to tell you guys a story how I always saw the word fair for me. I grew up around two older brothers. They're 6 year and 9 year difference between me. So I'm the youngest one. And for me, what fair was if they hit me, I could hit them back. If they hurt me, I could hurt him back. If they were to yell at me, I could yell at them back. And to me, that was fair, because whatever they were doing to me, I had the right to do it back to them, because that was fair to me. And all of us are preacher kids, so you know how preacher kids usually are, usually like rebels. But that's just the way we kind of went. That's just the kind of way we grew up. And the place where we grew up, that's just the way it was. I didn't really see it as a wrong thing, because I was just saying whatever they were doing to me, I was doing it back to them. And I can remember so many times that I got into fights, not with my brothers, but outside, because my brothers told me, they can't do that to you, Roman. You have to hit them back, or you have to fight back. And I was wrong for doing that. Because for me, that was fair, but in reality, was it really fair? Is that what really Jesus calls us to do and calls us to be? And Jesus does tell us. He explains that in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. And we'll go there in a second. But I want you guys to think about this, because no matter what background you come from, or no matter where you grew up in, this is something that you either seen or you either lived by this once. Or some people who are still here today might be living on that, where it's the eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. What you do to me, I would have the right to do it back to you, because that's fair. And that's the worldly perspective, because the world still sees it that way. The world sees that you need to take it, you need to grab it, you need to go out there and grab it. But Jesus doesn't really teach us that, does he? So in the Sermon on the Mount, I'll explain to you guys briefly. I've been teaching this to my kids over there in RCA and here in this school. The Sermon on the Mount, the intention, what it really is about, what Jesus is trying to teach us. You see, the Pharisees believed in this law, and that they had to keep it perfectly, and that's what they lived by. They lived by the law, and they had to do everything exactly how it was and perfectly. But Jesus isn't really saying that. He's saying maybe sometimes we can do the right thing with the wrong motives, and it makes it bad. Does that make sense to you guys? Because what Jesus is trying to teach us in the Sermon on the Mount, it is actually about where your heart is and where your intention is. Sometimes I will make mistakes, but if my intention was correct and my heart was in the right place, was I really doing the bad thing? I want you guys to think about that. And that's what Jesus is trying to teach us here in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5 and 6 and 7. He's telling you, where is your heart at? Is your heart really into it? Because honestly, the Pharisees, they were keeping the law perfect, but was their heart really into it? Were they really doing it because they loved God, or were they doing it because they knew that was the right thing to do? And I want you guys to think about that. Maybe that's something that I've been wrestling with, because that's what the Pharisees did. The Pharisees were just trying to keep the law perfect, but their heart really wasn't into it, what they were doing. And that's what Jesus is trying to teach them. Jesus is saying, he says in the adultery, if you already looked at a woman lustfully, you've already committed adultery. And this is crazy for the Pharisees, because their whole life they're thinking this physical stuff. They actually thought they had to physically be doing that. But Jesus is saying, if you already did it in your heart, you have already sinned. And that's what Jesus is trying to teach these guys. And that's what Jesus is trying to teach us. That Jesus looks at your heart. And it's really nice, because I remember in the story of where David is going to be appointed king, everyone was looking at his physical appearance. He was a shepherd, scrawny little kid. And they elected him to be, he was going to be the new king. And it says in 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 7, that man looks at the outward appearance, but God looks at your heart. And that's the same thing Jesus is trying to teach us, that he's looking at your heart. So this morning, this is where I want to go with. I want to go to Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. So if you guys wouldn't mind going with me there. I'll be there in a second. I should have put it before. I really am pretty nervous. I'm sorry. So this is what it says in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And when it says you have heard that it was said, he's talking about the law. This is what the law was back then. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him also the other. And I'm reading this, and I scratch my head, because that's confusing to me. Because the way I grew up, how is that fair? That if someone has the right to hurt me and I can't do anything about it? How is that fair? But to Jesus, he calls us to love our enemies. Jesus calls us to love, and Jesus calls us to forgive. That's what God calls us to do. But this is something that's crazy to me, because that's just not the way I grew up thinking. And this is exactly how the Pharisees felt too. They did not grow up thinking this. They did not know that it was about your heart. They did not know that they had to just take the hits. They knew if you stole something from you, I can steal something back from you. That's just the way things worked back in the old law. So the reason why I'm teaching this class is because recently I've been feeling like I've been treated unfairly from other people. For example, I think one of the reasons that I've been feeling this way is that me and my best friend Gavo over there, we have the opportunity to teach class here in RC, and we teach school here in Bible class. And it can be really challenging sometimes, because I know that Gabo and myself, we pour out our heart and we pour out everything that we have on these kids sometimes. And all the times, I'm here to say all the time, we pour out our heart and we give out every effort to try to teach them. And sometimes it feels like they just don't care, if I'm being honest. Sometimes I feel like they just don't care if they're there or not. They don't care they just don't care about this stuff. And that could be really challenging for me, and I could feel like I'm being treated unfairly, because if I'm putting every effort into you, I expect you to do the same for me. But is that really right? If these kids or these teens really don't know God yet, and that's what me and God are here to do. We're trying to teach them God, and that's what the school here is for. The mission, you guys know what the mission is to teach these kids about God. And some kids here simply maybe just don't understand who God is. I know I didn't. At that age, I was still lost. But I have the audacity to feel like if I'm being treated unfair, if I was doing the same position that they were. And that's lately what I've been struggling with, and that's lately something that I've been really chewing on and thinking about, is that this is why we're here. This is why the school is here, is to teach them about God. It feels like I'm putting a certain expectation on people about a Christian expectation when they're not really Christian yet. But I just feel like that's what I need to do, because if I'm being good to you, I deserve to be treated the same way. But I don't think that's correct for me to think about that, because some people just simply don't know God yet. And that's the reason why I've been feeling like I've been treated unfairly these past couple days and couple weeks. And I think about a perfect example of someone who was treated unfairly, and that's our Savior, Lord Jesus, right? All his 3 years in his ministry that he was here doing his Father's work, he was treated unfairly. I mean, something that just sticks out to me about Jesus is when he's on that cross and he's already been whipped and he's already been put the nail between his palm. Something that he said that has sticked out to me is, "Forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing." And Jesus is saying about the people that are crucifying him, that are hurting him, and he's saying, "God, just forgive them. They don't know what they're doing yet." And that's what I've been thinking about this, because some of the kids here, some people out there in the world that they hurt me or that I feel that I'm being treated unfairly, they don't know what they're doing yet. And that's why we're here, because we want them to know what they're doing. We want them to get there, because that's where we're at right now. Sometimes, yes, we do mess up. Yes, sometimes we'll fail and we'll trip up. But we keep trying. That's what we talked about today in morning classes, that we keep trying. But some people just don't know what they're doing yet. And that's something that Jesus said that has stuck out to me. I feel like I get surprised that the world has treated me unfairly as a Christian. But even Jesus tells us, right? He says, "Do not be surprised if the world hates you for what? It hated me first." That's what Jesus is saying. He's saying, don't be surprised, because it's something that's going to happen. You're going to be treated unfairly. People are going to hate you, because they hated Jesus first. It's just the way things are. But Jesus is saying, you don't need to go there. They don't know what they're doing yet. But Roman, Gabo, Skylar, you guys know what we're doing. You know what we're supposed to do. As Christians here, we know what we're supposed to do. So what I really want you guys to challenge you guys today is that God calls us to love people. God calls us to love even if we're being treated unfairly. God calls us to forgive even when they don't deserve it. When we think that they don't deserve it, He still calls us to forgive them, because they don't know what they're doing. But since we know, as Christians, we know that we're supposed to do, that's what I want to encourage you guys today. God calls us to forgive. He does not say repay them with evil. He even says that in verse 39. He says, do not repay an evil person, but to just simply turn the other cheek and to just keep moving forward. So this morning, when we start to sing right now with Skylar, what I really want you guys to get from this lesson today is to keep moving forward. And if people are going to treat us unfairly, that's okay. If the world's going to hate us, that's okay. We keep moving forward. Even if they treat us bad, we're going to forgive and we're going to love, because that's what God did and that's what Jesus did on that cross. How can I feel treated unfairly when Jesus was tortured in the worst way possible, and the thing He says is forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing? So this morning, that's my encouragement. I want you guys to really try to live out what Jesus did. I know it's hard, and I know we'll slip up, and I know we'll trip. But if that's what we're striving for, and that's what we're moving forward to, that's what God calls us to do. God calls us to try. So this morning, I want you guys to try with me, because I have struggled. I have messed up this past couple weeks, but I'm going to keep on trying, and I'm going to keep moving forward.